7 Talk 910 KNEW.
There's a couple of other articles I put up on michaelsavage.com. One of them is the terrible truth about Walter Cronkite. Don't miss it. Walter Cronkite was an evil man. Walter Cronkite stabbed our troops in the back and said that the North Vietnamese, the NVA, had won during the Tet Offensive when the opposite was true. Many of our men died and were wounded for life defending South Vietnam from the communist takeover. It doesn't matter whether or not you were for or against the Vietnam War. All you got to know is that Cronkite's public verdict that the 1968 Tet Offensive was a defeat for the U.S. was a turning point in American support for the war. Walter Cronkite falsely claimed that the Viet Cong had held the American embassy for 6 hours. It was a major defeat for the communist enemy, by the way, militarily. It's a terrible, terrible thing to realize how distorted the news is, that the people in the media don't even know this or didn't want to report it. In 1979, Cronkite gave an interview to the Soviet magazine Literary Gazette, and he told one of the reporters that the Soviet threat was most likely a myth. He was a fellow traveler, in other words, which is why the media has glorified him, which is why the media made him into something he wasn't. Read the terrible truth about Walter Cronkite. I think it's still up on michaelsavage.com. I know World Daily did an article on it, but Cliff Kincaid did one, which we have to cover tomorrow. There's another article, I hope it's still there, about the world's oldest man died over the weekend. He was 113. If you read the whole story, there's a couple of points that you should know about the old man. There is trusted Cronkite pushed anti-American agenda. It's still up. The old man, you don't have to repost, but the man flew in World War I. The old, not Cronkite. Cronkite flew on communism his whole life, or let us say left-leaning socialism. Let's just say media anti-Americanism. Those are the wings upon which he flew. The old man who died at 113 in England, he actually flew in World War I, and he said he lived this long primarily to tell people wherever he went about the heroes who flew airplanes with him. He loved his fellow compatriots. But when you read the whole story, the end line was the most important, the last couple of lines. They said to him, to what do you owe your longevity? And he said, whiskey, cigarettes, and wild, wild women. Now, he didn't say wild women. He said wild, wild women. In other words, he was a party animal. And he lived to 113. Whiskey, cigarettes, and wild, wild women are what he ascribed it to. Not vitamins, not garlic, not Tai Chi, not exercise, not running and looking at his watch, but whiskey, cigarettes, and wild, wild women. And you have to look at that and wonder what's happened to the West, that you have nanny states and ninnies running everything. You have guys like Mayor Bloomberg in New York who banned smoking. You have a government that tells the soldiers that they can't even smoke in a combat zone. Of course, that was overturned by the military for now. You have a U.S. Navy that won't fire a shot. You have a U.S. military that just wants to use money for developing weapons, but never uses them to defend us. Here we have a captured troop example, one of our men, some are implying he deserted. I don't know where they got that from. I have no idea. But let's say he was captured. We're sitting here wringing our hands over a captured soldier. There's an answer to that, too. Capture 1,000 of them. Capture a whole village and make it hostage, unless they release the soldier. What kind of military is this if it's not being used? Why are we sending our men into harm's way and telling them to fire a gun only when they consult a booklet back in Washington first? How can we win the war? We can't. Basically, we cannot win in Afghanistan. It's over. We may as well just leave. Let the Taliban have Afghanistan. It's a lost cause. Of course, it won't happen because Afghanistan is now Obama's Iraq. After all, how else can the military-industrial complex keep on rolling along unless you have a good hot zone in order to a place where you can test weaponry and, of course, practice various techniques and charge the taxpayer $16 for a tray of food. There are no longer cooks in the military and combat zones. They're provided by one of the subsidiaries of one of the defense contractors, prepackaged meals, and they bill the military for each meal. And I understand if a soldier goes back for a second helping, they charge another $16 per tray back to the taxpayer. So there's no longer a cook cooking the food who's an enlisted man. There's now a contractor cooking the books. Not an enlisted man. An enlisted gangster contractor who paid off a congressman to get the contract. So it's Obama's Iraq. And now the ungrateful Iraqis, after we liberated them from Saddam Hussein, they won't even pay us back through reparations. Why don't they pay us back? We're broke. We're bankrupt. It cost us at least $1 trillion to liberate the 24 million ungrateful Iraqis. Why don't we demand reparations in the form of oil? I called for it in my book, Liberalism is a Mental Disorder. Doesn't it make sense to you that we should be paid back? You can't pay back the families of the men who died or the men who were walking around without legs, can you? You could pay back the Treasury somehow, but I had a plan on Friday on how to pay back the families whose men died in combat or who were maimed in combat. I came up with it Friday, didn't make it to the news. I said, do what Alexander the Great did. Forgive taxes to the survivors of those men. The wives will never pay taxes again. The children will never pay taxes again. If the father died in Iraq or in Afghanistan, no taxation for life. Alexander the Great did it. Why can't Obama the Magnificent do it? Why? Because the concept of no taxation is a poison pill to a Democrat, or for that matter, to a Republican. San Francisco, Susan, K-N-E-W, San Francisco. What's on your mind, Susan?
Yes, Michael. I'd like you to pursue the suit with Jackie Smith. I'd like to see her go down, and I want to see you do it. You're the voice to the voiceless, Michael, and I really appreciate all of it. I'm a 10-year listener, and I don't know what I would do if you ever went off the air. So,
well, look, I got to tell you something. It's because of listeners like you that I get up and do the show at all anymore.
You're the
I certainly don't do it for acclaim, and I certainly don't do it for the love of my compatriots, my conservative compatriots in the media, do I?
Well, they're not loyal to you, Michael, and you deserve loyalty.
Well, they're not loyal to the bigger issue. The bigger issue is not me. The bigger issue is freedom of speech. Is that not the bigger issue?
Absolutely. Absolutely. If that's gone...
Look, I've got a few steps to go through first. I'm a little... I'm not focused right now, Susan. My mind is wandering for some reason. The fact of the matter is that the list has not been lifted. They just said they won't be publishing such lists anymore. But we don't know what that really means. My attorneys have written a letter to the Treasury solicitor in England asking for clarification. He's written a letter to the Home Secretary asking for clarification. When we have that clarification, I will read it out on the Savage Nation. Right now, we don't know. You see?
I don't want us to know.
Hey, Susan, if I am lifted from the list and I'm invited to give a speech before Parliament in England, let's say a year from now, what if I put together a tour and I said I'm going to invite 1,000 Savage Nation loyalists to come on a massive tour with me? We'll charter 3 jumbo jets and we'll all fly into England together for a massive speech. And it'll be all those who devoted any money to the Savage Legal Fund. Wouldn't that be amazing?
Amazing.
Wouldn't that be phenomenal? 3,000 people showing up in England?
Savage. Michael Savage.
Well, it's a big day for Michael Savage, today being July 20th. I know many of you are tuning in for the first time or to hear what I have to say specifically about the news that was all over the Internet over the weekend, certainly not in your local dinosaur newspaper. And that is from the London Daily Mail, Saturday night, new UK Home Secretary ditches least wanted list, calling it a blunder. The decision to scrap Jackie Smith's policy of naming people banned from Britain for spreading hate could make it impossible for the UK to contest Michael Savage's demand for damages, they say. I want you to notice that they said they are thinking of scrapping the policy of naming the people who are banned from Britain. They didn't say they're actually going to take my name off the list. So understand that I am still in danger. I have still been lumped in with murderers and terrorists. And as a baseball coach once said, it's not over till it's over. Michael Savage, pack your bags for England, says WorldNet Daily. They quote me from Saturday night where they say, calling it a sudden sign of sanity, Savage said he's stunned by UK Home Secretary Alan Johnson's decision to scrap his predecessor's list of people banned from Britain. Read more about it on michaelsavage.com. Don't miss the article about Walter Cronkite. I was not surprised to see the media glorifying this anti-American leftist. I was surprised to see that virtually nobody in the media knows who he really was except WorldNet Daily. And they wrote a great article on michaelsavage.com. Trusted Cronkite pushed anti-American agenda. The so-called most trusted man in the country was actually the man who stabbed our troops in the back during the Vietnam War. And I'll tell you more about it today on the Savage Nation. And now, surprisingly, from the Washington Post, an article by two reporters who are asking Obama, saying, "What's next, Mr. President? Cardigans?" And what do they mean by that? They say that barely 6 months into his presidency, Barack Obama seems to be driving south into that political speed trap known as Carter country.